All right, welcome everyone. Tonight we're going to talk all about gut and gut health. We're going to dive into what leaky gut syndrome is and how it's caused and what other problems that can cause in our bodies. And we're going to have a video from Microbiome Labs, the founder of that. Awesome video. I was just talking to people here that joined live that it's like the perfect video that explains the whole cascade of events that happens from when our guts first start having issues, all the way through to how it triggers a various chronic illness, even things that aren't seemingly gut related, whether that's brain fog and fatigue, thyroid issues, joint pain, etc. So we'll get right into it. The live viewers, please ask any and all questions. That'll help make this livelier. But let's start off first. I'm just going to share my screen here. And I have a few slides pulled up here. So the first one we'll start with, and I figure we go through what healthy digestion should look like, or what digestion should look like to begin with. Because if we know what normal is, then it's easier to learn what abnormal is and learn the consequences of that. And so we'll talk about that first. Then the second part of the talk, we will look at the video from Kiran Krishnan. He is the founder of Microbiome Labs and a PhD microbiologist. And again, has such a great video that explains that whole issue with dysbiosis and leaky gut syndrome and then inflammation. And then at the end, we'll talk about the 5 C's of healthy digestion and things that we can do practically to help improve this entire situation that we see here. So what we have in front of us here is just a schematic, very basic, of the digestive tract. And it starts from, some people say digestion starts in the mouth. Others will say, and rightly so, that it starts probably in the brain first. So it's even when we start thinking about food or when we smell food. Just the thought of it, like if I start mentioning some yummy foods that we all like right now, you probably might even start to salivate a little bit. So that gets the digestive juices going. So one thing that's supposed to happen is we're supposed to have a little bit of time there between the idea of food, the thought of food, and then actually putting it in our mouth and starting to chew it. So that's what's supposed to happen. So each step of the way, I will explain how some of those things can go wrong. So the way that part can go wrong is that if we are eating in a hurry, you sit down at your desk, you have food there, you just pop it in your mouth. Well, you miss that very first step of digestion, that thought, that preparation that your body goes through, getting ready for that meal. So that's step one. The next step is the mouth. So as we put food into our mouth, we chew it, and we chew it enough, and then we swallow it, and it goes down the esophagus into the stomach. So the errors that could happen there is that we rush through that first, or in this case, our second step here is the chewing part of it. And they say one way to think about it is you should chew it into consistency of like a smoothie or liquid. It shouldn't be 2 or 3 bites and then down the hatch. Because then what happens is now you've screwed up the first step essentially. And when it gets down to here, it's going to be in a form and consistency that makes it a lot harder on your stomach to deal with the next step. So one thing we can do here is make sure we chew everything thoroughly. And if you're a fast eater, this can be difficult. I'm a fast eater. I'm hungry. I want to get the food in, eat my meal. I got other stuff to do. But that's not the right way to do it. And I've been working on this over the years. So you want to chew slowly, and you can even take it to the extreme and say, I'm going to chew every bite at least 15 or 20 times. And again, what this does is this gets it in the consistency, it breaks down so that it's easier when it gets down further in the system. The other thing it does is we have glands in the mouth that release something called salivary amylase, which breaks down our carbohydrates. And it's all sorts of carbohydrates. It could be complex carbohydrates like potatoes or things like oatmeal, all the way through to the simple sugars. So giving it time to mix and giving your saliva and the salivary amylase chance to mix with those foods is going to help digestion. All right, so down the hatch, down the tube called the esophagus to the stomach. Our food, which is at this point hopefully thoroughly chewed, is now mixed with stomach acid, hydrochloric acid. And what this does is, in a way, it sanitizes the food. So if no matter how much we cook foods, how clean we are, we're always swallowing different stuff. I mean, even breathing in air and then having it get to the back of the throat, we're swallowing lots of stuff. And this hydrochloric acid is enough to kill off that stuff. So if you swallow things like maybe bacteria or spores from fungus or all the way through the like viral particles, etc. That stomach acid mixes with that and helps to essentially kill that stuff off. It also helps further break down our foods, and it mixes and it churns and it squeezes and all of this stuff is mixing together, and that before it goes down to the next step into the small intestine. So where things go wrong here is, one, it goes back to the very first step of thinking about foods. If we're not ready to receive that food, stomach acid isn't being released in high enough amounts. We're eating in a rush, which we'll get more to in a second. We're not going to have enough stomach acid around. Or we take antacids. Because if we have acid symptoms, so if some of this acid starts to go up in the esophagus, we start to have symptoms. So we take things like Prilosec to block the acid production. We take things like Tums to neutralize the acid. So it takes care of the symptoms, but the problem is then it starts to create issues because now we're not getting that highly acidic environment like we should. And now stuff gets in the small intestine, whereas we'll see here in a moment in the video where it starts to cause some major issues. All right, leaving the stomach for a second, we go down into the next step, which is the small intestine. And here, especially in the beginning part of the small intestine, we start to get some other enzymes mixed in. And it turns from acid to a base. So the acidity from the stomach is neutralized, otherwise it would cause damage further down. So that's neutralized. And then we start to get a release of enzymes from the pancreas. We get enzymes that will break down fats, sugars, and proteins. I'm sorry, fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. We also get a release of bile from the gallbladder. Now, the gallbladder is not showing up on this diagram, but it's right here underneath the liver. That concentrates bile that's made by the liver, and then that gets pushed out to the small intestine here, where it further helps break down fats. And that bile and these enzymes also keep the small intestine kind of clean. So just like stomach acid sanitizes the food that's here, bile and enzymes help keep this more or less a sanitary environment in the small intestine. And when we talk about the probiotics and the good bacteria, and then bad stuff too that lives in there, most of the time that's going to be found in the large intestine. But when we start to get problems, it starts to back up into the small intestine. So that's where things can start to go wrong. So again, if we don't eat in a calm, relaxed state, we rush through it, we're not letting our digestive enzymes and juices flow, we get less of that bile, we get less of those digestive enzymes, and then that could, one, make it harder for our body to digest those foods. And if those foods aren't broken down enough, we can't extract our nutrients out of it. So that's one problem. Another problem is that we start to have food in forms that can now feed other stuff, bad stuff. So if normally the enzymes break down the good fibers, there's none left for other bacteria and stuff to break it down. But if we don't break it down ourselves and absorb it, so now bacteria and fungus and yeast and other things that grow abnormally in the small intestine, now that's left over for them. So now they can start to feed on it. And this can eventually cause something called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, cause lots of bloating, constipation, and diarrhea. All right, so the small intestine, we're through there. And in this area here is where we get a lot of our nutrient absorption as it moves in through the walls of the small intestine. So the intestine, this whole thing's a big tube, right? And the walls in the intestine, that's where the nutrients flow in and out and other things flow in and out, hopefully allowing the good stuff to flow through, but keeping the bad stuff out. And that continues to a certain extent in the large intestine. So now we get in the large intestine. So it comes up here, across, down, and then out with the bowel movement. And the large intestine, there's a lot of fermentation that happens here. So a lot of digestion happens here that's not solely us, so to speak. So up to this point, our own digestive enzymes, our stomach, our acid, our digestive enzymes here are breaking down and causing the digestion and then absorption of the food material at this point. In the large intestine, we get a lot of fermentation from good bacteria, good yeast, stuff that should be there, and that further helps break down and extract and create nutrients from what's left over from the food at this point and provides us with a lot of good things. So there's something called short-chain fatty acids. So this is fibers that make it down this far that aren't absorbed by our body, that we can't break down with our enzymes. They make it to the bacteria. The bacteria now break it down, and their byproducts from that breakdown are these short-chain fatty acids. And these do a lot of great things. So at the local level here in the large intestine, they feed the colon cells, keep them healthy. They also help decrease inflammation. When they get absorbed in the bloodstream, they do things like help regulate different hormones. They help regulate cholesterol levels, blood sugar levels. So a lot of good things there. So as you can see, like just from that one thing alone, the short chain fatty acids, healthy digestion, and having enough of these things and having enough good bacteria to break down these things and produce these short chain fatty acids are important to our health as a whole. So when we're talking about gut issues, it's not just gut issues or digestive issues. It's truly whole health, whole body. And that's why we always want to make sure, that's why we focus on it so much, whether it's the total gut restoration, doing the gut microbiome testing, the cell core program to a certain extent, trying to really dial in and get that gut health really good. Because you may have cardiometabolic issues. So things like poor blood sugar regulation, insulin resistance, high cholesterol, even blood pressure, high blood sugar. So all those issues, yeah, you need to eat the right diet and dial in everything else as well. But if the gut's not working properly, we don't have a good level of good bacteria, then that's going to cause the body to struggle in all these different areas. All right, so let's look at, so we're gonna zoom in, and not just with my little cursor here, zoom in, although we can do that too, but we're gonna zoom into the level of the large intestine and look at what's inside that tube and the interface between where the food and the bacteria and all that stuff is in the middle of the tube. So if it was water going through a hose, it would be the water part is where the food and the bacteria and all that stuff live. And then we got the walls of the tube. So the walls, the inside of the hose. And that's also where bacteria and other things live. But then that's also where we start to absorb stuff into the bloodstream. So the challenge of the body here is, and it's quite amazing, is that we want stuff to go through it. We want some stuff to go through it. So we want nutrients. We want those short chain fatty acids. We want B vitamins. We want vitamin C. We want all that stuff to go through that gut wall and then leak into essentially that bloodstream that's surrounding that hose or that gut wall. And then that blood takes it to the liver filters it, processes it, and it goes to every cell in the body. So vitamin C, we eat it, we swallow it, goes in the stomach, small intestine, absorbs in through the gut wall, goes to the liver, and it's in the bloodstream at this point, goes through the liver, and then goes to all cells in the body. But when bad things get in there, that can be a problem too. So that's the amazing part is we can let that stuff through, but then there's all this other stuff we don't want to allow through. So think about all the foods that you eat. Think about all the stuff that kids put in their mouth. And so there's lots of stuff that can get into the gut, which is basically an extension of our outside environment. So it's not sanitary. It's not part of inside of our body. It's more part of the outside of our body than it is the inside of our body. So just like we have skin to protect us on the outside of the body, this gut wall protects the interface between the outside world and the inside world in the gut itself. So let me jump over here to the video. And it's only, I think, a few minutes long, so it's a good watch. And then we'll talk about that at the end.
This is a full schematic of a healthy intestine. A healthy intestine should include abundant keystone bacteria, limited pathogens, or potentially harmful strains, and strong physical barriers. A healthy gut microbiome should have a high abundance of beneficial bacteria that can limit the overgrowth of unwanted pathogens. These beneficial microbes help protect the integrity of the intestinal barrier by producing short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate and other metabolites help maintain a strong mucosal barrier that helps shield the intestinal cell lines from damaging toxins and pathogens.
So just to pause it there for a second, just so it's clear. So what we're seeing up here is the inside of the hose. So this is the water that's running through the hose. And this is part of the inside layer of that hose. This is called the mucosa layer. So it looks like water here. So this is that mucousy layer that protects then this, we'll call it the skin of the inside of that tube, or the skin of the intestine, the gut. So this would be the equivalent of, let's say if you wore like a long sleeve t-shirt or a long sleeve shirt that's over your skin, that would be the mucosa layer is the shirt. And then this is the skin itself. So if these say there's bad bacteria up in here, it'd be like walking through the woods and brushing up against poison ivy. Well, if you have a good layer of shirt between the poison ivy and your skin, you won't get any irritation. of the skin and itchiness. However, if this mucosa layer starts to wear away, or if you poke a hole in your shirt and tear your shirt, now you get contact between the poison ivy and your skin. Well, now you get poison ivy, you get itchiness, you get all the welts and everything else. So something similar happening with the gut.
That helps shield the intestinal cell lines from damaging toxins and pathogens. Additionally, butyrate can reduce intestinal inflammation and improve barrier function by maintaining the tight junctions that hold intestinal cells together. A disruption in this ecology, where beneficial microbes become outnumbered by potentially harmful bacteria, is called dysbiosis. Dysbiosis is driven by these main factors.
So what he's talking about here, all the things that can affect this balance here. And one thing he mentioned was tight junctions. So you could see each of these squares represents a cell of the intestinal wall. And when things get through here, this is where the blood vessels are and where the blood flow is, because we need to get our nutrients from the inside of the intestines into the bloodstream. And it does this through this, you can call it a filter, I guess. One analogy I like to use is like a screen in a window. If it's a nice spring day and I want to open up the windows and let fresh air in, I want to let the fresh air in, but I don't want to let all the bugs in. So the screen's there to help that. So in a healthy gut, you have these gap junctions that he talked about, where there's really small spaces for some stuff to get through, our nutrients, but keep all of these other bad things out. One is LPS that we'll talk about here in a second. And when all this is balanced and working correctly, you got tight gap junctions, you got a good, healthy mucosa layer. But these things across the top of the screen, stress, antibiotic use, pathogens, mycotoxins, chemicals, all this stuff can disrupt this balance. It can decrease the healthy bacteria, and then there's less production of those short-chain fatty acids that keep all of this stuff healthy. And antibiotics is a major one. So that's why when, especially this time of year, we're getting a lot of people the past few weeks, they got sinus issues, and usually something like that might take a week or two. Nasal sprays, Manuka spray, the iodine spray is probably a better strategy, because if you take an antibiotic, you're taking it and it's affecting things in your gut. And if you can target things to your sinuses and just let it run its course, let the immune system work, great, that's better. Now, if you need the antibiotics, it blows up, it's severe, you get checked, and Kristen or your doctor agrees that you need an antibiotic, then fine. There's no reason to avoid it completely, but it is a reason not to jump to antibiotics too quickly.
As the microbial population becomes unbalanced, unwanted pathogens begin to degrade the mucosal barrier. If the mucosal barrier is not intact, toxins can migrate towards the intestinal cells, inflicting damage and creating inflammation. As tight junctions loosen and break apart, this creates gaps in the intestinal lining that allow toxins to enter circulation. This migration of toxins from the intestines into circulation is called leaky gut. Leaky gut is a self-perpetuating problem, affecting at least 50% of healthy Americans, as it can trigger chronic inflammation throughout the entire body. This inflammatory cascade starts with a toxin produced within the gut itself called lipopolysaccharide, or LPS. Circulating LPS gets bound by a transfer protein called LPS binding protein, or LBP. LBP carries LPS to the CD14 toll-like receptor complexes.
All right, gets pretty deep in the weeds here, so don't worry about all the fine details. But essentially what's happening is, so this LPS gets through these gap junctions and gets into the bloodstream. So now we're in the bloodstream, or now we're in the tissues inside of the body. We're no longer in the middle of the tube of the gut. So when this LPS gets here, it's something that shouldn't be there. It's a foreign invader. So our immune system springs into action. And that's what's happening here, is the immune system's marking this LPS as a problem. And when our body senses a problem, it has to spring into action, because if it's an infection, if it's a bacteria, if it's a virus, it needs to start doing something before it gets overwhelmed. And usually when we have things like sepsis, or we had people that were really affected by the the COVID virus, and it got to the point where their body couldn't fight it off. And it's usually because their body becomes overwhelmed, their immune system can't fight it off quickly enough. So in a healthy immune system, it springs into action, gets everything ready, but that immune function or getting ready is inflammation. So it gets inflamed. And what a lot of people don't realize is inflammation is part of the immune system. It's part of our normal response. We want that inflammation to happen to prepare our body's immune function to ramp up and fight off whatever's going on in there. Or if there's injury, heal and repair the injury. So we want some inflammation when we really need it. But when this happens, so we got this leaky gut and this LPS leaks into the bloodstream or into the tissues, our immune system springs into action. And again, it's only doing what it's supposed to. But when that happens every meal, every snack, every day, so now we got this low level chronic inflammation that's always there because this process is pretty much always happening every few hours, every time we eat something. Now, like I said, we're going to go into a bunch of other things. All these are just inflammatory chemicals, inflammatory stuff that can circulate around and then trigger inflammation in all these other tissues. So all of these initials and abbreviations that come up, that's all they are, inflammatory chemicals.
On the immune cells, like macrophages and dendritic cells, which then activates the NF-kappa B inflammatory cascade. The activation of NF-kappa B increases the production of pro-inflammatory mediators, like TNF-alpha, interleukin-1 beta, interleukin-6, and MCP-1. This is the same exact sequence that occurs in sepsis, also known as blood poisoning or septicemia. Immune cells that become activated by LPS and release pro-inflammatory cytokines exist in all parts of the body and are capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier. Therefore, the inflammatory response can occur throughout the body, including the brain, fat stores, nerves, joints, and more. This type of inflammation is a breeding ground for a variety of...
So just to highlight a point there, point something out. So all of those, that alphabet soup of inflammatory chemicals, all they are messenger signals to other areas and other tissues of the body where these other immune cells live that, hey, something's going on, prepare for it. And depending on the inflammatory chemical and where it ends up and what it activates, depends on what symptoms you end up having. So if it affects brain tissue, you're going to have brain fog, difficulty focusing. In the extreme, I guess to the extreme, could start triggering certain diseases and illnesses. And there's probably some sort of connection. So I don't want to say it's exactly like what causes Parkinson's or what causes MS. But if you do something and you stimulate the immune system and you create this chronic inflammation for a long period of time in these different tissues, that's where we start triggering these diseases. And it's not like these things just happen. Yeah, it could be genetic, but you're genetically susceptible to certain diseases in certain areas, perhaps through how they respond to these inflammatory messengers, these inflammatory chemicals. Could attack the thyroid. You end up with Hashimoto's. Could attack the joints. You end up with rheumatoid arthritis. So all of these diseases are just names for what's happening in these different tissues. And it's not like there's a bacteria or something specific that you can catch to trigger rheumatoid arthritis. But if you have certain bacteria putting off LPS and these other bacterial byproducts in the gut, it's getting into the bloodstream, triggering these inflammatory chemicals that then trigger these tissues to become inflamed. Well, that's what triggers a lot of these problems.
Chronic illnesses. Reversing the dysbiosis and the damage to the intestinal barrier is paramount to health and wellness. Thankfully, there is a solution to the problem.
All right, the rest is a commercial for Microbiome Labs. So let me just stop sharing for a moment. So a lot of stuff in that video. What questions come up for you guys? Does that all make sense? Is there anything that's not clear? And then while you guys are thinking about that, so if you have a question or you want to comment, go ahead and raise the hand using the reactions feature here in Zoom, or type in the chat. But essentially the fix for that is to remember all those things at the top of all those things that can trigger problems, things like stress, antibiotic use, the wrong foods, et cetera, to help fix this and help heal and repair the gut. You need to take that stuff away as much as possible, and then provide the gut with things that can heal it. So I kind of joked that I was a Microbiome Labs commercial after that, but the fact of the matter is they have research showing that megaspore specifically lowers the amount of LPS in the blood. So that's one thing they can measure. And they measured people, they gave them, of all things, they gave them McDonald's breakfast. And I'm not sure exactly which one, but they gave all these subjects a McDonald's breakfast and then waited an hour and then tested their blood for LPS. There should be none in there, but there were levels of LPS in the blood. Then I believe it was for only 30 days. So it wasn't a long period of time. For 30 days, they gave them Megaspore biotic, these spore-based probiotics. And then they repeated the experiment after 30 days, gave them the same breakfast, waited an hour, and measured the amount of LPS in the blood. And I think all but one subject had none. So if there were 100 subjects, 99 out of 100 showed no signs of LPS in the blood. So that showed that the use of those probiotics helps seal up that leaky gut. So that's why we're such a strong proponent of them, and because we know it works. And a lot of people that have taken them in our practice over the years share similar results. So that helps seal up the leaky gut. And there's, we won't get into exactly how it's done, but those probiotics send signals to other good bacteria and immune cells and helps kind of calm all that stuff down, allowing those gap junctions to heal themselves. And then in addition to that, when we're eating the right foods, when we're taking things like prebiotics, so those are the fibers that feed the good bacteria. Now those numbers of those good bacteria grow, and that crowds out and helps fight off the ones that shouldn't be there. And at the same time, giving them more of those prebiotic fibers, now they're producing more of the good stuff for us, those short chain fatty acids. So that's why we really like that TGR program, because it includes all of those things. And then the other one, the mega mucosa, helps with nutrients to help heal that mucosa layer, or that shirt sleeve that protects us from brushing up against the poison ivy leaves. So no questions there yet. And so I'm going to share my screen again, and we'll go to the last slide here. So what can we do about it is a question. And we have the 5 C's of digestive health here. And this is from just a purely like diet, lifestyle, things that we can do, behaviors that we can do outside of supplementation, because supplements are only part of it. They're great to help heal. They're great to help accelerate the healing process, to help get rid of things that we don't need. But if we can do these things, this will go a long way. It has to be the foundation of everything else to build upon. So the first C is choose. So what that refers to is choosing the right foods to begin with. So choose to eat the foods that nourish our body, that help create and help cultivate a healthy microbiome, that take stress off our body, that doesn't do any damage. So things that do damage are like excessive alcohol use, consumption, eating processed foods, sugars, lots of processed grains. All that does is it creates a lot of inflammation. It irritates our digestive tract, cell walls, breaks down that mucosa layer, feeds the wrong bacteria. So if we choose all the right foods, that feeds good bacteria, helps supply the nutrients we need, and everything works the way it's supposed to. The second C is chill. So what that means is don't just run home, grab something, and down the hatch. Or don't like swing into McDonald's, grab what's at McDonald's, a Big Mac, and then eat that while you're driving to your next appointment. Because when you're in a stress state like that, your fight or flight state, when you're in fight or flight, the body's worried about getting blood flow and function to the muscles, a little bit to the brain, the heart, to help us fight or flight or run away. It doesn't care about digestion. So less blood goes to the digestive tract. So if you eat food and you jump right back in, or you're in a stressful environment, that's not going to work out. The next one there, the third C, is chew. So we mentioned that at the top, chew thoroughly, break down that food into the consistency it's supposed to be in by the time it gets to the stomach. If you do that, perhaps you won't have reflux if you're dealing with reflux. You also get more nutrition out of it. There's a story that I've heard told many times where it was a Holocaust survivor, or it was either that or a POW camp. They were in there for many months, and it was one of the few survivors. And they interviewed him afterwards and said, what did it for you? What helped you survive when others didn't? And the answer was they didn't get much food, but every little piece of food he got, he chewed like some ridiculous amount of times, like 50 times. So they say that he was able to extract more nutrition out of it, even though there wasn't much there to begin with. He was able to maximize the nutrition he could pull out of that food. So we can learn something from that. We don't have to chew 50 times each bite, but maybe chew 10 times each bite instead of none. Cherish is the fourth C. So cherish is staying in that calm, relaxed state afterwards. Chill out a little bit afterwards. Cherish that meal. Don't just jump right back into your activities. And then the final C there is check. So what that refers to is checking your bowel movements, your stool, and seeing what it looks like. Is it normal? There's something called the Bristol chart, which I don't have ready here. But is it formed? Is it watery? Is it too hard? So you want the stool to be normal, and it should be a normal color. It shouldn't be really black and tarry. It shouldn't be really light colored. It shouldn't be like little pieces. It should be fully formed and a normal color, normal consistency, and you should be having bowel movements on a daily basis. So part of that check could be check how often you're going. And if there's any problems with that, that could indicate problems with digestion, which indicates the need for making sure you're doing the other 4 C's or doing a program like probiotics or doing a gut test and seeing what the results of that are. So, all right, I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. And there's a question here. So if you went through fixing a problem and you take a Megaspore daily, can these problems, can it return if you go back to a bad diet under extreme stress? So yes, you're probably better off. So the question seems to be, if you're taking Megaspore or something like that to help with gut health, but you stop doing a lot of the right things like we just talked about, and you go back to a bad diet, you're under a whole lot of stress, can problems come back? And I would say probably, yeah, absolutely yes. So that's only a piece of the puzzle. So it's probably better than doing nothing at all. It might slow down the worsening, so to speak. But you could still develop some of these problems like dysbiosis and leaky gut syndrome, et cetera, if the rest of the puzzle isn't being focused on. All right. So how is that for you guys? Does that all make sense? And while you guys are thinking of questions, I'm not gonna share yet. I'm gonna look for a report because I'll give you an example of what this looks like then when things go wrong when we do a gut test. So let me pull up a sample report so I'm not using anyone's. So one thing that we are able to do, which is pretty neat, is we can do gut testing. And for those of you that have done it, you know, but essentially you get a test kit, and then they have collection materials. So I think now it has a piece of paper you can drape over the toilet. Back in the day, it was a French fry, literally straight up French fry container, and you pass a little bit of stool into however the collection method is. And then you take out a little spoon, and then they have test tubes that you can put it in, and you shake it up to preserve it and send it into the lab. And then they can take that and they can analyze it. So I'll share my screen here. I got a sample report pulled up. So this is the test that we've been using lately. I really like it. It's got a lot of good information. It's not overkill like some of the testing we've done in the past. Relatively affordable. It's under $400. Some of these can get pretty ridiculous, $600-800. And it gives us a lot of good information, especially in those. So if you're looking at this test and wondering, is it right for me? If you've gone through base camp, well, one, if you've had a history of gut problems, we usually say, yes, do this at some point, whether we do it right at the beginning or go through base camp and go through a period of like probiotics, prebiotics, reconditioning, and then do this. It can be done either way, but certainly in people that have done a lot of work so far and are still having issues and things still aren't great, this test is great to get because it really helps us drill down and figure out, well, why are you still having this dysbiosis, or why is the gut still not working correctly? And it can be used just for general wellness. So this is something that I have done every couple of years or so. It's been about a year or two since I've had one done, so I'll probably be looking to get this particular test done here pretty soon to see how my gut's functioning. That way I can catch some abnormal bacteria or fungus or anything that's in there that shouldn't be there. I can address it now before it becomes a problem. But if you look at this, these results here, at the top, they have what it looks like. So it's unformed. If there's any mucus present, the color, is that normal? Is there any blood present? If there is, that could indicate there could be like polyps or ulcers or something like that that need to be looked into further. So in addition to this being a functional medicine test, it becomes a medical test too and can catch some things early. In fact, I had this show up in someone a few years ago. They had just done the stool test, the Cologuard, to rule out colon cancer. And then 2 months later, they did our test and there was blood present. So we said, you should really go back and get the colonoscopy done. And they found like a 3 centimeter cancerous tumor that they were able to remove on the spot. So it was good that they did this. And so this can catch some medical things too. But we have the short chain fatty acids that we talked about. So we can see what amounts this person's gut is producing, and specifically the bacteria within their gut. And in this case, they're okay, maybe a little low here on the valerate. Then we can see other things like calprotectin, and this shows this is a measure of inflammation in the gut. So in this case, this person's pretty high. It should really be less than 5. We can also catch things like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. So autoimmune gut disorders we can catch with this, because if this was 200, it probably indicates something like that. And again, we can get them on, get a colonoscopy done, have them see a GI specialist. Here's one of those like digestive enzymes from the pancreas that we talked about earlier. We see what levels of those are in the stool, and they should be above 200, but really above like 800. So we can see if the person needs help there. And it's usually not because they need more pancreatic elastase, like in a supplement form. It's just that they're eating too quickly and they're not giving their body a chance to produce it. So we go back to those 5 C's to help them with this. Or they can do some things like bitters. So at the beginning of a meal, this is one thing I didn't mention, but just like we think about chew our food, we start to salivate, we start to get those digestive juices flowing, we can do that through the use of bitters as well. And you can use the straight up bitters that you use to make cocktails and put a few drops in your mouth, really taste it, have it pucker you up a little bit, really taste that bitter taste. Or you can use like bitter greens and have like a little green salad before your meals. So things like dandelion greens or spinach or things like that, kale, that those bitters really help get those digestive juices flowing. And then there's other numbers here. I won't go through the whole thing, probably boring some of you now, but we have secretory IgA, which is the immune system in the gut. And if it's really high, it means it's overactive and inflamed. If it's low, it means it's underactive and probably burnt out. So we need to support that. If we ultimately want to help your gut fight off the infections that shouldn't be there. Zonulin, when it's high, means that you have leaky gut. So the zonulin controls those gaps. If it's high, those gaps will be bigger, and leaky gut's probably an issue. And then we can see undigested fats. If gluten is irritating the immune system, that will show up. And this number here is like a detox thing, and it's usually fine in most people. But then the rest of the test goes through the different organisms that are present in the stool. A lot of times things that shouldn't be here. So like this, Blastocystis hominis. So this is a parasite. Microscopic, so you won't see it. It's not like it's a big worm or tapeworm or anything like that. Microscopic like a bacteria, but they can cause problems. And then they check for worms as well. And then other abnormal bacteria. And then here, this class is interesting here because it's potential autoimmune triggers. So for people with things like rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's or other autoimmune diseases, if we look and we see some of these are high, we want to get rid of them because these produce byproducts that go into the bloodstream through that leaky gut scenario, trigger the immune system, and they can trigger some of these autoimmune issues that we see in people. And then here's candida and yeast, fungus, more bacteria, H. pylori, which can cause ulcers, it can cause acid reflux, viruses. And then this last section here is the normal gut bacteria. So things that we should have in certain amounts. In this particular case, there's a few that are on the lower side, but not bad. I just had one earlier today where pretty much every one of these were low. And they were having some problems because of it. They didn't have any of the other stuff. And actually they went through our CellCore program to kill all the bad stuff off. So the gut looked great otherwise. It's just that they're at the point now where we need to really beef up their good stuff and feed them more of the prebiotic fibers, introduce some probiotics, and focus on foods that really up the levels here. So, all right, everyone. That's all I have in terms of stuff that's prepared. if there are any questions that come up, I'd be happy to answer them. But I mean, as you can see there, and go back to that video especially and watch that again, and you can see how that it's a domino effect. So we eat the wrong foods, we're under high stress, we use antibiotics, we eat grains full of glyphosate. I mean, there's lots of reasons why we can break down that mucosa layer. Now the mucosa layer is broken down. Now stuff gets in contact with the intestinal wall. The intestinal wall starts to break down, creating leaky gut, and allows stuff into the bloodstream. Then our immune system goes into effect, goes into action. But part of that is sending signals to other parts of the body that, hey, there's an infection here. We need to ramp up our defenses. We need to be on high alert, which either one causes just inflammation in these other tissues, or autoimmunity, where our normal healthy cells, immune cells, attack our other cells that it shouldn't be. Those cells should be there, like our thyroid cells or joint cells, for instance. And then it kind of spirals from there, and then it's perpetuated. So then you get diagnosed with Hashimoto's, you get the Hashimoto's treated, they put you on medication, and they address the thyroid issue, but now you have this gut issue still going on. So then a few more years goes by and you develop something else, maybe joint muscle pain, or maybe it's something that's not diagnosed. That's probably the worst situation, because you don't have anything that's super obvious. And you're like a patient I just had a consult with a couple hours ago, where they have brain fog, horrible fatigue all the time. They do all the regular blood work. Nothing shows up as being wrong. And their doctor said everything looks good. And sometimes people get sent to psychiatry, psychology counselors, because the doctors, nothing's wrong. So you must be in your head. It must be just anxiety. It must be just depression. It might be that too, because I'd be pretty depressed that I feel like crap all the time. But there are some physical problems that people have that just aren't often checked. So, all right, quiet group tonight. That's okay. Hopefully it all made sense. And if anything comes up after this, you don't get a chance to ask it here, something comes up later, post it in the Facebook group or send it to me directly, and I'd be happy to answer that. And the more questions, the better. Like, never hesitate to send me any questions, even in the portal. On Facebook, and the Facebook group is great because I can answer them for everyone then. But even if you want something a little more private, you don't want to ask it there. Well, one, you can post it anonymously in the Facebook community, and people won't say, I don't think even I can see who posts the question. Or you can send it to me in the portal and I'll answer you there, and I'll probably share it elsewhere too. But the more questions I get, the more I can answer people. Dan, I'm just reading the chat here, time to get a workup again, especially if it's been a few years, especially if you're having problems. And again, that gut test is something I'll do. I probably should do it every year. I've been doing it every year. I've been doing it every other year. But yeah, the information is always good to go off of, and then you can better target what your treatment is. So instead of just taking random probiotics and other supplements, you can see like, oh, this stuff's starting to grow, so I'm going to hit it with this particular supplement. Or if I need a certain bacteria type, or I need more of the certain short chain fatty acid, like depending on which one it is, you can do different types of fibers, and you can either focus on those foods or take a supplement. So good. All right, guys, have a good night. Thanks for watching. Oh, one more question. Is it a good idea to start the probiotic for a bit and then get testing done? So that's where I've kind of flip-flopped myself on this. Usually we'll have people come in, we'll go through base camp, and then we might even do like TGR, because that's going to be part of the plan anyway. And that can never hurt. So we'll have them do TGR, which is Megaspore, the Mega Prebiotic. There's a few supplements in that plan. And then after that, do the gut test. But I'm thinking like maybe we should do the gut test earlier, either right in the beginning, or do base camp for about 6 weeks, because things are going to change. And ideally, people that go on base camp are going to stick with it to a certain extent long term. So see what it looks like while you've been on that plan for 4, 6, 8 weeks, and then start at that point, and then see what you need to take you the rest of the way there towards optimal. So I would say the ideal time, after talking that through, great question, would be if base camp is a complete departure from what you normally eat, give your body time to adjust to that, and then do the gut test. Whether you take prebiotics in the meantime, that probably won't matter a whole lot. It'll probably look better by the time you get the test done, but usually it doesn't do enough to address everything, and we need to more specifically target certain organisms. So great question. It's one that we think about a lot here, one that I think about a lot, but yeah, it can really be done at any time. I wouldn't come in and do it like as part of the initial workup unless you have really severe gut issues and you're already following a decent diet. Then I would say, all right, let's just get the information as soon as possible, because it takes, by the time we get the results back and we meet with their clinical specialist, it could take 3 to 4 weeks from the time you submit the sample to the time you hear back from us. All right, good. So gut is, I mean, it's a big topic, and it's something that I don't think we pay attention to enough oftentimes. And it really can be, you could trace a lot of different disease processes back to that whole cascade we saw there in that video. And so that's where it gets exciting in terms of all the new research coming out and being able to help people. And if you go into PubMed, so PubMed is the repository for all the peer-reviewed research articles that are out there. If you go in there and type in things like, I don't know, Hashimoto's and the gut, or dementia and the gut, or depression and the gut, so all these things that aren't related to the gut, or go on Google for that matter, and you'll see all these articles that pop up relating the two together. And there's some research, and again, no direct links necessarily, but the mechanisms are there. So my opinion is do what we can to optimize gut health, and then it can take care of a lot of things for us in the future. So, all right. Thanks for joining, guys, and we will see you next time. Thanks.